I try to watch every great video twice. The first time as a normal audience member, simply enjoying the content. But then the second time, I try to figure out why I enjoyed this video. And if I can answer that question, I may have some success at replicating this success for future videos that I help produce. The MrBeast team released one of their most ambitious projects to date, and I found myself watching, rewatching, and then rewatching it again, and still coming up with more and more things to take notes on. It was truly a masterclass in production, and I'm really excited to try and reverse engineer it for us. Now, if you haven't seen this video yet, you should probably go do that before watching this one. But the basic premise of this MrBeast video was the classic last to leave challenge with a twist. There were 100 contestants of all differing ages 1 to 100. Right out the gate, this is a tremendous undertaking because it's more than just 100 people, which on its own is already quite a feat. This is 100 people, of which 25% required some form of supervising guardian, because 17 of them were minors and at least 10 of them were 90 years old or more. MrBeast team doesn't only cast from Greenville, North Carolina. They've been known to cast from all over the country, if not the world. So potentially we're talking up to 130 plane tickets, right? Absolute insanity. Not so fast. A producer's job is to make a project as feasible as possible, which sometimes includes thinking outside the box. But in this case, I think we're thinking just inside the fishbowl ecosystem that the MrBeast team has been carefully cultivating statewide, aka North Carolina. You see, North Carolina actually ranks 8th nationwide for its elderly population. They have over 200,000 people in the state of North Carolina that are 85 years old or more. And that number may seem small to you, but my home state of Kentucky only has 75,000 people right now. And this is supremely relevant because when you think elderly people, two things tend to come to mind. The first is they don't like to travel. Getting them out of their house? That's a good day. Getting them out of their neighborhood? That's a great day. Getting them out of their city? Their state? Unheard of. They don't leave state lines unless it's for a funeral. So what are the odds of getting an elderly person out of their state to come to North Carolina for some obscure YouTuber? And I say obscure because they don't recognize who's popular. That brings us to the second point. Elderly people are technologically inept most of the time. They don't use computers that often, much less YouTube. They know who Paul Newman is. They know Frank Sinatra, James Dean. Those are the celebrities of their period, their era. But for us, who is MrBeast? I mean, well, for us, MrBeast is MrBeast. But for them, who is MrBeast? This name means nothing to them. So you already have two major hurdles to get over here. How are you going to get them to come to the set? And why should they care? They're old. And so it's purely logical to assume that the majority of the elderly that were cast for this video came from inside of North Carolina. Consider North Carolina MrBeast's castle, okay? Jimmy has spent 5+ years cultivating his relationships with local governments, universities. He's done so much good in the state of North Carolina and all over the world, but he got his start in North Carolina with the food pantries and the challenges, and he went viral there first, okay? So let's assume that his core fan base, the place where he's most likely to be recognized, will be here, especially amongst the elderly, okay? Now the same rule applies for the youngest kids. While it's true that MrBeast has a lot of children in the 5 to 12-year-old bracket who would definitely know who he is and love him and want to meet him for sure, how many of them would have parents that are also going to be willing to travel, okay? On the flip side, as a producer, I shouldn't assume that just because it's MrBeast, oh, he can afford it, let's bring the kid and his family from Hawaii, right? That may happen, but it's not going to happen the majority of the time. It makes sense that if one contestant is going to equal 2 to 3 different plane tickets for the family to come as well to supervise the child, it makes sense to source that casting more locally so that you can afford to spend more money in different areas of production instead. So we can assume that probably at least 25% of the 100 contestants were sourced more locally, probably close to Greenville or at least in North Carolina. Although there was that 100-year-old World War II veteran, and as far as the United States are concerned, there are only 170,000 World War II vets still residing in the US. So for casting to have found this guy, really well done. Casting for MrBeast is impeccable, well done. Putting exactly where each contestant physically came from and how they got there aside, homage needs to be paid to the casting process itself. Every MrBeast media platform was utilized, even LinkedIn, even Instagram stories, to promote this open casting so that interested users could input their information and potentially be called upon. And what's more, we also know for a fact that some of these contestants weren't just plucked out of the ether for their age and just that. Some of these contestants were specifically casted to fit a particular narrative in the storytelling that they wanted. If you don't believe me, just look at number 69. That guy was perfectly cast. So now you've got 100 contestants and 20 to 30 guardians or parental figures on set. Where are we going to put them? Let's take a moment to focus on the cubicles and start by answering these questions. What were the walls made of? How many panel walls were used in total? How expensive were they to custom fabricate? How much do they weigh, and from how far did they have to ship them? How expensive was that? Now obviously the answers to these questions will be heavily speculated, but we do have some clues from the video. Given the fact that Jimmy threw a hammer through one of the walls in the video and they didn't shatter like normal glass, it's safe to assume that this was some sort of acrylic, aka plexiglass. And so let's study the layout really quick. You've got 100 cubicles, which is 10 by 10. 10 cubicle rows, each containing 10 cubicles, right? Now, how many panels is that? If every cubicle has 4 panels, then, it makes sense that every row would have 40 panels. 40 times 10 would be 400. Seems pretty easy, but not quite. If you think like a producer, you try to save a little bit of money where you can. So it may be that every pair of cubicles shared one panel in the middle, which would reduce the number of panels required by 90. So I estimate that at the very least they needed 310 panels to 400 panels, but chances are they maybe potentially doubled up and bought extra in case there was any problems with shipment, because obviously if there's a problem you don't want to have less than what you need to start production. So whether you've got 310 or 450, that's still a very sizable order, and as such you should look for a manufacturing plant capable of pushing those kind of numbers. I did some digging, and the closest factory that I could find in regards to where the studio is physically located was in Raleigh, North Carolina, called the Piedmont factory. It's about 90 minutes away. So unfortunately, I couldn't actually get a hold of anybody at the Piedmont factory in North Carolina. But there's another Piedmont. In fact, there are several Piedmonts all over the country, but there's another Piedmont very close to where I live, and I was able to get a hold of them. And I was directed to one of their sales reps. Her name was Dora. Dora was great. I actually got Dora to pull up the MrBeast video on her phone while we were on the phone, and she answered all the questions that she could. She was amazing. So shout out to Dora. One of the biggest things about being a producer is you can't be scared of talking on the phone. So just calling up random people with the most unusual questions, you've got to develop some charisma, I guess. So right off the bat, I learned that there are varying degrees of thickness when it comes to plexiglass panels, and these ones seem to be about 10 feet by 10 feet height and width. And since they wobbled so much when Jimmy shoved the hammer through it, we can assume that these were on the thinner side, probably no more than 0.25 inches wide. So with this information, at the very least, we're talking panels that were between 100 and 150 pounds each. And so since there were probably around 400 panels, we're talking 2 to 3 truckloads worth of shipment here. So as much as I'd have loved to have gotten a quote on exactly what this entire process cost, unfortunately Dora's company only specializes in the distribution of plexiglass panels. I needed a company that could handle the manufacturing, the fabrication, which is customizing the glass. You'll notice that 3 out of every 4 panels had some customizing to them, fabrication. They included holes and slots for both communication and wire management. They don't come made that way. You've got to customize them. That costs extra. So manufacturing, fabrication, and then also, of course, the distribution or shipment of the product. And so I'm told by Dora that the Piedmont factory in Raleigh, North Carolina, again, only 90 minutes from the studio in Greenville, can handle all 3 of these things, which makes them a very prime target for potentially having been the factory that filled this order. So if you want to know how much it costs, get a hold of Piedmont in Raleigh, North Carolina. They could probably give you a very accurate estimate. And so my respect for the team increased many-fold after learning how complicated it was to order glass panels. These panels had to be customized, and so before you can customize them, you need to have a plan in place. What is the orientation of every single cubicle going to be? I need to have precise measurements ready to hand out. And so there's a lot of pre-planning here that, if you don't pay attention, is very easy to overlook. It's not a simple case of, here's 4 panels, set up a cubicle, there you go. No way. This was a lot more complicated than that. Moving on, every single cubicle came with equipment relevant to video production. And bear in mind that every item listed here is multiplied by 100. 4 sets of RGB lights lined the corners of every cubicle and were used to emphasize each contestant's vote choice during choice-related challenges. These lights were connected to a series of voting buttons that were also connected to a monitor displaying relevant contest information to each contestant. Every cube came with a stand to hold this monitor, and every cube had a foundation that consisted of wiring covered by the numbered turf. This wiring connected monitors and also the 2 cameras which seemed to be present in every cube, and these wires existed in 2 bundles per cube. The 2 cameras each served a different purpose according to their angles. The first was stuck in a bird's eye position which monitored the contestants from above, providing an interesting perspective and caught the audience's eye, while the second camera was reserved for eye-level video diary entries so that audiences could emotionally connect with each contestant. Contestants were no doubt encouraged to record their thoughts about the competition as it developed. And later, these same recordings would become tools for the storytellers to use in post-production in determining the narrative of the story. There was incredible attention to detail with every aspect of production in this video, but none more so than this next bit. Pay attention to the colors located in every single cubicle. You've got grass green, YouTube red, and extremely bright white, alright? I noticed this because MrBeast's shirt color appeared to be changing every other scene. It would go from bright white to dull gray, but it didn't appear that he was changing his shirt, because why would he change his shirt multiple times on day 1 or day 2 and so on? And it was then that I realized that the colors were popping in the cubicles because they use a bright white light, and it's because they wanted those colors to pop, because it's more attractive to the eye and keeps the users engaged. In addition to the production elements, every contestant also had a bed complete with pillows and a blanket or 2. But what they didn't explain in the video was that every bed also had drawers whose contents were never directly addressed or even revealed. But from the video, we have several clues that help key in the purpose of these drawers. In multiple scenes, contestants are observed holding golf putters, and in at least one moment, more extensive golf gear is seen. Much later in the video, during a challenge elimination round, contestants were using marbles, but somehow player 19 accidentally misplaced one. It's more realistic to assume that player 19 had access to these marbles before the competition began than to assume he somehow managed to lose one in an unrelated place as soon as the competition began. So it stands to reason that these drawers were potentially used to store multiple challenge-related props, and that the golfing equipment never became relevant enough to explain. It seems that along with the custom costumes each player wore, they were also given a hygiene bag that contained deodorant, tissues, and probably dental hygiene care as well. In addition to quality of life and production elements, every cubicle also came with a bathroom button / light alert system that likely also served as a dual purpose in alerting production of when a contestant wanted to exit the competition. No doubt contestants were encouraged to film exit interviews that might potentially be used in post-production. Given that for at least the first 3 days there was more than 50 contestants still remaining in the competition, it's highly likely that the MrBeast crew manned 2 to 3 or potentially more mobile toilets, and chances are they sanitized them several times a day. Now, given the fact that you've got 100+ people in one room, including the crew, you got to take care of people, and so this role is extremely important to the success of the production. So I don't know if they got any credit after this was all done, but major shout out to whoever was running janitorial staff. You guys did amazing. Great job. By the way, did you guys notice that Chris Tyson was wearing a pinky cast for one of the first scenes of the video? Let's talk about meals. We don't know what time of day the first day officially began, but we do know that at the very least we began with 100 contestants plus their extras. Alright, now assuming they got 2 to 3 meals a day, we're looking at between 1 and 300 plus meals on day 1, and we're not even including the crew, whose number we can only guess at. Now, day 2 and beyond is much easier to calculate because we know how many contestants we're dealing with for sure at the start and end of every day. I estimate that if we take together all of the data that we can compile from the video, that the MrBeast team supplied for contestants and their extras only between 800 and 1100 meals throughout that week. Now, as for taking a stab as to how much do these meals cost the team, we have very little data to go on, but we do have past videos to base some of it on. We do know that the MrBeast team is notorious for feeding their contestants meals ranging from cold oatmeal to personal pizzas. We can at least confirm that pizzas were part of the menu on day 3 when there was approximately 52 contestants remaining. Now, I tried to figure out which restaurant this pizza came from, but there are actually 18 different stores in Greenfield that all boast a menu involving pizza. Now, I tried to look at the pepperoni style of the slices we see here, and it seems that of all the menus I looked at, Little Caesars might be the best bet, although I don't know if I recognize those boxes. But if we assume it is Little Caesars, we're looking at a price range of potentially $5 to $6 per pizza. And with an estimated cost of $200 to $300 for that one meal, accounting for the potential mass discounts and tips, we can assume an average cost of $3 to $7 per meal throughout this 7-day contest, giving us a total estimated cost of between $2,000 and $8,000. So what about the storytelling? Obviously, this is one of the most important parts in production at immersing the audience, right? And I think that the MrBeast team did this element exceptionally well, especially at around 7 minutes into the video when we first start allowing the contestants to vote off each other, right? We didn't know that we were about to do this 9 more times, but for that first 60 seconds from 7 to 8 minutes, we really milked that first elimination for all that it was worth. We built up the tension. The audience at home watching the video is deciding, okay, who do I like, who do I dislike, who deserves to go, and they established a villain right away. Oh, this person's got to go. Wait, why does this person got to go? Oh, I don't want them to go, right? And then you've got all these video diaries, if you will, these little quick interviews that are happening during this entire process to build up this momentum, to kind of tell the story, to tell the narrative, right? And then when we finally get that sense of relief, the release that, okay, all that roller coaster of emotion has come to a standstill. We finally eliminated somebody. Then Jimmy drops the bomb. We're going to do this 9 more times. All right? The audience at home is, oh, we're going to do this again? Oh my gosh, I'm not ready. This is insane. And every single one of those contestants were also feeling the same thing. And because we were able to capture those emotions for the story, we're able to, as audience members, empathize with the contestants, and it adds to the immersion of the story, right? And so think about the production, the pre-production that had to happen. Okay, we're going to tell the story this way. We're going to announce the next part of the competition, the next part of this challenge that they voted for here, right? We're not going to let them know yet. So we need to position different cameras all over the game and position them in such a way strategically that we know we're going to capture a couple of moments so that the audience at home can empathize with that feeling of, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. Why did we vote? I might be in danger of elimination here. So immersion was really powerful here. Storytelling was incredible, and that's one element that I really identified with. Really phenomenally well done. And if you pay attention to the timestamps, there's actually a specific pattern that Jimmy's editors use quite often. They build up the suspense for the first portion of the challenge over 60 seconds, and then for the next few minutes go through several other portions quickly. There's no longer any need to build the suspense every single elimination. So if we're going to do 10 eliminations this round, we'll build up the suspense for the first one, and then over the next couple minutes, knock out all the other ones, right? It's really great editing technique that really preserves the immersion of the audience. Think back on day 7, last 2 contestants remaining. What was stopping the MrBeast team from just going through with the final challenge, figuring out who won the competition, and ending the video there? Everybody would have kept watching. There's no way your audience retention would have stopped. But instead, the MrBeast team took a pause, took a breath, and said, no, we're going to let the audience reset their palate, and we're going to hit home that moral dilemma. we're going to have the families of the 2 final contestants come and visit their family members and remind the audience, really, truly, emotionally speaking, and we're going to remind the audience of each of these contestants' whys, because right up until this point, we as the audience may have decided, oh, I want this person to win because I like them the best. But by emotionally reminding the audience of what these 2 people had at stake and why they wanted to win, it created an argument, an internal fight within ourselves, the audience, because now we have to ask ourselves, if we let the woman who wants to take her family to Disneyland win, what happens to the man and his daughter and his family? If we let him win, they don't get to go to Disneyland. And so there becomes an opportunity cost here. And this decision to really hit that home for the audience was a great storytelling element, in my opinion. Throughout the entire competition, whenever a contestant was eliminated, the MrBeast crew came in, dismantled their cubicle, and put a fat red X in place of where they once were. By the end of the entire competition, we have a sea of red X's. The stage is set. You have 1 versus 1, 2 briefcases in front of them, and 1 question. Do you have the money? What a mind game. What a way to capitalize on the social, psychological theme of the entire competition. It was a true blue nail biter, and even the simple choice of placing that GoPro inside of the briefcase that gave us this beautiful angle of the winning contestant's face as he opened the briefcase. That look of triumph on his face. It was the closure that the audience needed to finally draw this competition to an end. And in my opinion, it was a perfect way to sum up the final challenge of the series. But when it comes to storytelling, sometimes the story untold is just as interesting. And as is the case with most MrBeast videos, a lot of really important elements to a story are often sacrificed for video retention. And throughout the video, I found remnants of some of these elements that I found very interesting. Remember when contestant 69 was voted off? Well, actually, he voted for himself, which helps explain why the other contestants were applauding his departure. To an audience member who didn't catch this detail, it may seem as though the other contestants were simply being cruel, but that's completely unfair. Actually, contestant 69 chose to sacrifice himself for everyone else, which makes him insanely cool. At nearly the beginning of the video, we were introduced to several different characters, one of which was contestant number 2. Now, to an audience member who's not in the know, they wouldn't realize that this was actually Tucker Tyson, the son of Beast Game member Chris Tyson. Now, fun fact, Tucker actually turns 3 this month. One of the last challenges of the video was to remove Jenga blocks from your tower without it tipping over. Now, one twist to this challenge that wasn't explained was that every contestant was forced to wear a gigantic red boxing glove, and that they could only use the other ungloved hand to remove the Jenga blocks. This was a really cool twist to a classic game, and I believe it deserved some special attention. When it was down to the final 5, contestant 43 gave an amazing monologue that was extremely well spoken and well written, so much so that the audience might be under the impression that he was a voice actor. I don't know if that was true, but it was so well done that it left me wondering if perhaps this monologue was added in post-production rather than there in real time. And speaking of post-production, how about that ending? It seemed to flow so well from the first third of the video, where Jimmy specifically calls out how honesty always pays off in regards to contestant 54. Except, at that exact moment he mentioned it, honesty hadn't paid off yet. Contestant 54 survived until the final 5 much later on in the video, so his dishonesty didn't do him in there. It makes me wonder, did they add that bit then in post-production so that it would complement the way the video ended? I don't know which is which, but it was definitely fun to think about. And finally, let's talk about this right here. Throughout the entire video, multiple calls to action talked about the shop app activation that the MrBeast team was going to be running throughout this video. And, audiences that were lucky enough to catch the video within its first 30 minutes were overjoyed to find that they had a chance to get a keepsake from the actual set of this video. And, it sold out so quickly because they were effective in how they made the audience, oh, I've got to have that. Oh, it's so cheap. Oh, they're going to run out. That sense of urgency, they created that. And it wasn't just, oh, I've got to have it. They got people to look at the app. They showed people advertisements throughout the video that were well placed. And when I say that, I mean like it wasn't just a generic come shop at Walmart, right? We've got all these different things. They specifically showed things in the advertisement that were applicable to the theme of the video. One of the items was, what would I buy a 100-year-old for their birthday? This video has a 100-year-old in it. That's a perfect ad placement. So customizing ads like this, very effective. Obviously, it got me to open up my wallet. But yeah, I could nerd out about this entire video all day, but this video has gone on far too long already. So I apologize to those of you guys falling asleep. But if you've made it this far, I really appreciate you letting me nerd out like this. Until next time, this is Entooelle signing off.